So there is one giant big joke taking place this weekend, and I'm going to go through it today, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single joke on this joke. We're going to start straight away with the early joke of the card, Juancamilo Ronderos versus Clayton Carpenter. I'm going to be going with Clayton Carpenter. He's way better than Ronderos. He's way more skilled. He's way more dangerous. Juancamilo started his career at flyweight in the UFC, lost that fight to David Dvorak and got immediately destroyed in that fight as well. Might I add, got hurt and then rear naked choked like he didn't even belong in the UFC. However, he did take it on short notice, so I understand. However, Clayton Carpenter, 26 years of age, very experienced in the amateurs, had a great pro career so far, has had 3 steps up in competition in his last 3 fights. I know he's only 6-0, but 8-3, 5-2, 3-1 opponents in his last few bouts. And I definitely believe he's going to get this one done over Ronderos. He looked very, very technical on the Contender Series and got a very solid win. So I reckon he's got this one in the bag. Juancamilo Ronderos is just not good enough to be in the UFC. He fought to a split decision with a 13-6 Eric Shelton, who's alright, but his best days are way past him. Let's be real, he's lost a little bit of motivation. He hasn't been in the UFC since 2018, so I just don't really consider this a big test for Clayton Carpenter. It's not a bad guy to go to a split decision with. He's an experienced guy, Eric Shelton, with good wrestling, but I think it's the stand-up of Carpenter that Juancamilo's going to have to worry about. So I'm going with Carpenter. We move on. Up the joke. AJ Fletcher versus Gorimbo. I'm going to go with AJ Fletcher here. Another bit of a close matchup, though, because Themba Gorimbo's a dangerous guy, fighting out of Zimbabwe, of course, but he trains in South Africa at Johannesburg's gym. So he's a good fighter. However, there's just we start seeing him go to a decision against a 13-6 opponent. So I know AJ Fletcher has had a sort of tough go of it in the UFC, but Matt Semmelsberger went on to beat Jake Matthews, and arguably AJ Fletcher did better than Jake Matthews did against Matt Semmelsberger. I don't remember him getting dropped in that fight. I think it was a matter of Matt Semmelsberger winning a scramble at the end of the 3rd round that actually won him that contest. And then, of course, you've got the moment with Andrade, who, again, has had some losses in the UFC, but look what he did against Jack Della Maddalena on the Contender Series. He had a great performance against him. So I don't think either of those losses are enough for me to completely write off AJ Fletcher. I still think he looked really dangerous in that Andrade fight. He's a very well-conditioned fighter. He trains at a great gym. He's under Dustin Poirier. I reckon just give him a little bit of time and he'll start getting some wins together. And I think it starts this weekend with a win over Gorimbo by finish early rounds. We move on to the next joke up the card. Sadykhov versus Elder. This is a decent one. Nazim Sadykhov versus Evan Elder. I've got to go with Sadykhov, not just because of his name. However, that is kind of a decent indication of how this fight's going to go, in my opinion. This guy's another guy out of Longo and Weidman's gym, training with all those guys up there, Aljo and them ones there, Merab Dvalishvili. He's a very good prospect. He got a great win on the Contender Series, and he looked really good on the Contender Series as well against a 9-1 opponent who was a decent prospect in his own right. And then you've got Evan Elder, who is getting into the UFC, stepped up against Preston Parsons, lost that fight. I don't think too much of Preston Parsons, so I'm not sure how to feel about that one. The guy that he fought before even getting into the UFC and getting that opportunity was 9-16, and he took him to the 3rd round until he finished him. I don't think this guy's a bad prospect. The 9-16 guy was a short notice fill-in, but he still took him to the 3rd round, and he's taken 6-6 opponents to unanimous decision. Like, it just doesn't seem like he's dominating these guys on his way up the same way Sadykhov is doing, beating a 9-1 opponent by 3rd round TKO rather than a short notice replacement 9-16 opponent by 3rd round TKO. There's a difference in the way he's doing things on the rise. Both guys are very similar, but I just think the talent and the skill is in the favor of Nazim Sadykhov, so I'm going to go with him winning this fight by TKO in the later rounds. We move on to another joke up the card. Ovince St. Preux versus Philipe Lins. I'll go with Philipe Lins. If he can make light heavyweight and make it healthily, I'll trust him to win this one. Because to be fair to him, the fights that he's lost outside the UFC, one of them was to Vadim Nemkov, you know what I mean, at Bellator. And then he was at PFL, and he had a great career at PFL. And there's also a very high chance that he's on the source as well, let's be real. And I don't think much of Ihor Potieria, but Ihor Potieria was able to finish Shogun Rua in the first round. And OSP took him to a split decision. Now, I believe he won that fight very clearly, but don't be taking Shogun Rua to a close decision at this point in your career. And then there's watching once OSP, who was so dangerous in the grappling department, get ragdolled by Andre Petrosky, and other than that one successful moment that he had, got completely ragdolled in their grappling tournament that they had. So him versus Felipe Lins, it's just like, I'll go with Felipe Lins, I guess. Younger, definitely going to be more motivated, has a decent win against Marcin Prachnio, has had, no joke, not even over-exaggerating, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bouts cancelled out of his last 9 scheduled bouts. So he's definitely going to be hungry for a win. I'm going to go with Felipe Lins getting this one done, and I'll say he wins it by decision or late round, second round TKO, something along those lines. We move on to the next joke up the card. However, this one's not so much of a joke because it's the debut of Askhabov, who we've been looking for a very long time. He hasn't made his debut yet, but he was supposed to earlier on last year in 2022, I believe, and he was supposed to fight Herbert Burns, Joe Anderson Brito. Those fights fell through. He was actually supposed to make his debut in 2021, but it just never ended up happening. He was supposed to fight on the Contender Series 2021, never ended up happening. He got called up to the UFC in 2022, never ended up happening. So I think this might be the best thing that happened to him, because he's had 2 years off to really focus on his game and develop his skills. And now he's 28. He's not like a young kid anymore, 26, 25, coming into the UFC. He's now sort of like about to enter his prime soon. So I think that time off's going to give him a lot of maturing time. And also, he's just beaten so many people. You know what I mean? Pro career. This dude's 23-0. I know Jamal Emmers is dangerous, but he did drop Pat Sabatini, who we find out is getting finished in the first round by Damon Jackson. He's a naturally chinny type of guy, Pat Sabatini, with not a lot of skill on the feet. Now, this guy took Giga Chikadze to a split decision. You know what I mean? And he has a win over Corey Sandhagen. And he lost to Thiago Moises. So he's one of those weirdos, Jamal Emmers, where you never really know how he's going to do. But he didn't look great against Vince Cachero, so I'm never sure what to think about Jamal Emmers, but I'm just going to have to go with Askhabov here. There is a chance at an upset, and if it's crazy odds, I would recommend putting a little bit of money, but it's not so crazy odds because they do know Jamal Emmers is a skilled fighter, but I think those 2 years off are going to benefit Askhabov here. His last few opponents, 3-0, 7-0, 25-13, 9-1, you know what I mean, 7-2, 7-1. Like, these are opponents that he's taken on. They aren't schmucks the whole way through. So I'm going to trust in him to win this one and keep the ball rolling. Training Tiger Muay Thai, American top team, between back and forth, like Piotr Yan, that sort of collaboration he did. I'm going to trust in him to win this fight. I reckon he gets it done by decision. Maybe he gets hurt at one point by Emmers, but wins it as the fight goes on. We move on. Up the card, Lina Lansberg versus Mayra Bueno Silva. I think this is my lock of the card. I don't trust Lina Lansberg to win whatsoever. She's a middle-aged mum at this point. Call herself the elbow queen. Never seen an elbow finish from her in her career. Maybe there's a bit of ground and pound that we don't. Oh, she had one finish with elbows. No, 2. Okay, so that's enough to call yourself the elbow queen, I guess. That nickname aged well. She's been to decision ever since. She's 40. 40 years old. Mayra Bueno Silva's not young either, but she's 31. And she's dangerous on the feet. And she pressures forwards. And she's got a good chin. And she had a decent scrap with Manon Fiorot where she hurt her on a few occasions. And Manon Fiorot just beat Caitlin Chookagian. So, I'm going to trust in her this time. Definitely. Mayra Bueno Silva is going to push forward, beat up Lina Lansberg on the feet. And I think Lina Lansberg is going to take a panicked takedown shot out of nowhere. And I think that's going to lead to Mayra Bueno Silva latching up a submission off of her back. I'll say an armbar from on bottom for Mayra Bueno Silva. That's my lock. Late round 1, maybe round 2. Armbar from on bottom, maybe a triangle. I'll say submission in the first 2 rounds for Mayra Bueno Silva after beating up Lina Lansberg on the feet beforehand. We move on Jim Miller versus Alexander Hernandez. These fights are going to be fun. There's just no substance to this card. I want to take Jim Miller here. I'm going to take Jim Miller. They've made him an underdog against Alexander Hernandez, who always has one round of fight in him. It's a dangerous one round of fight. Don't get me wrong, it is a dangerous one round of fight, but on very short notice, which is how he's taken this fight, because this was supposed to be Jim Miller versus Gabriel Benitez. On very short notice, that one round of fight is going to be less and less. So I actually see Jim Miller winning this fight as it goes on. And probably getting a TKO in the third or second round is what I'm going to go with here for Jim Miller. He's very dangerous. He's tough. It's not like he's chinny at this point in his career. He's fought powerful guys that are on the up and coming, like Nicholas Motta, who I thought was going to beat him, but he ended up finishing him in the second round. I know that it was a different Donald Cerrone that Jim Miller then avenged a loss of, but still, Donald Cerrone did handle Alexander Hernandez. I just think he's a veteran enough to survive against Alexander Hernandez, and Hernandez taking this on short notice. I think he's just sort of going, Hail Mary, I should be able to beat this guy if I'm any good. He's on a 2-fight losing streak where he took a ton of damage. He took so much damage just 2 months ago, and he's already looking to step back in on short notice. Maybe that means he's healthy without injury, but he's definitely not healthy without concussion, so I'm going to go with Jim Miller by second round TKO, I reckon, is what I'll go for here, as Hernandez slows down after maybe a successful round one where he doesn't get a finish. We move on. Up the card, William Knight versus Marcin Prachnio. Another one of the tricky ones on the card, because Marcin Prachnio's not half bad. Not half bad at all. But, and he did beat Khalil Roundtree, and that's the annoying part about this. And William Knight part-time works for Amazon. And I'm very undecided about this matchup. But I'm going to go with William Knight finding that chin. At some point, William Knight will find that chin. And Marcin Prachnio's chin is not the best. He's been finished 3 times out of his last 6 fights by KO. So, yeah. I got to side with William Knight here. I think he goes for broke. Makes it a scrap early on, puts Prachnio on the back foot. I think Prachnio got knocked off balance by what's his name? I can't remember his name. Who's the guy? Ike Villanueva knocked him off balance in the first round, and Prachnio had to sort of like come back in the second round and get a body kick KO. So he's very good, but I can just see William Knight getting a dominant position and being able to beat him up from there, or getting a big KO on the feet. But he's going to have to come forward and be aggressive, because Prachnio is a very defensive fighter. But I'll take William Knight by KO. I'll trust him to win this one against Prachnio's chin. We move on to another fight up the card, which is Josh Parisian versus Jamal Pogues. I wasn't too impressed by Pogues on the Contender Series, but he did step into the Contender Series matchup on very short notice. He was supposed to be fighting Tafon and Chukwi at the end of last year, 2022. That got delayed. Tafon pulled out of that fight, so now he's taken this one in February against Josh Parisian. It's an interesting matchup because Josh Parisian isn't complete garbage, but we just saw Parker Porter get dealt with, and you know, Dontel Mays beat him, and we've seen these guys make mistakes and just be bottom feeder heavyweights, but they're still good enough to beat Josh Parisian. Now, he did get Badeau to the ground and do work there, but the split decision win over Rook Martinez was a robbery, and that's Rook Martinez. From what I saw from Jamal Pogues, although he's terrible and non-athletic and fat and disgraceful, that's the majority of heavyweights outside the rankings, so he'll fit right in. He's got a long reach, decently long reach, I guess. Nothing too crazy. I think I'm going to take him here. His boxing looked somewhat crisp, and he's young. And he reminds me of the type of guy where if you give him the opportunity in the UFC, he starts really taking his career seriously all of a sudden. So I reckon I'll take him to win this fight by decision against Josh Parisian in a great scrap between the two of them. We move on up the card to another fight. The co-main event, Zach Pauga versus Jordan Wright. Jordan Wright, on the mic, seems like a very intelligent man. When he speaks into a microphone and does an interview, he seems like a very, very intelligent man. when he fights in a cage, he seems like he's got chromosomes to spare, is all I'm going to say about Jordan Wright. The decisions that he makes are just god-awful on a regular basis. Now, he has shown some ability to get some offensive takedowns going, but Zach Pauga, one thing that stood out to me was his takedown defense on the Ultimate Fighter, so I'm going to trust him to win this one. He's fought smaller opponents before. He fought Marcus Perez and got a win there. And also, Jordan Wright's only win that he really has is Jamie Pickett and Ike Villanueva, and they are the worst of the worst in the UFC right now in that division. So I'm going to have to go with Zach Pauga here. It's dangerous. Jordan Wright is in it with a chance of an upset, but Zach Pauga is a big dude, and Jordan Wright usually does have the size advantage. And I think that's going to be taken away from him here. You know what I mean? He's fought at middleweight a few times. He's had trouble at middleweight with his chin. Maybe his chin will be better at light heavyweight. And maybe he'll be able to take those shots. Who knows? I just don't like this quick turnaround for him after getting KO'd badly against Dusko Todorovic. He got KO'd in October. He's back in February. It just doesn't seem right to make that quick of a turnaround. Zach Pauga got KO'd in August. He's took 6 months off. I like that. And he was winning that Usman fight before he got clipped by that perfect punch that put him down. So I'm going to side with Zach Pauga. He seems patient. I reckon if they get into a first round of chaos and both survive, I can see Pauga catching him on the chin with a counter shot after Wright gets reckless in round 2. So I'm going to go with Zach Pauga by KO. Wouldn't be surprised if Wright got an upset, though, but I'm just not willing to trust his chin in a scrappy fight. We move on to the main event, Jessica Andrade versus Erin Blanchfield. I was actually going to pick Taylor Santos against Erin Blanchfield because I thought it was a little bit too much too soon. Molly McCann can't grapple. Even Taylor Santos showed that when she fought Molly McCann and took her down every round. I know Blanchfield seems very impressive, but Andrade is just different, man. Andrade is just different, and women in the UFC aren't capable of hurting each other with their hands that much. I know it sounds crazy because they're pro fighters, and obviously they're somewhat capable, but no. There's different punches in women's MMA. There's ones that just punch like men, and it's like all of a sudden these women's fighters are like, oh my god, I'm feeling pain from a punch in the face. I think Andrade is like going to shatter that beak of a nose on Blanchfield's face. No offense. She's somewhat cute. But I think she's going to get her nose broken by Jessica Andrade early. And I think it'll put her in like a panic shooting mindset. And I think that she'll just get tagged up a little bit. I remember her fight against JJ Aldridge that she had. And JJ Aldridge was doing pretty good against her. And Erin Blanchfield, of course, eventually got the submission by guillotine in the first round. I get that. And that was impressive. But I didn't like what I was seeing before that. I was seeing JJ Aldridge doing pretty good. Blanchfield winning, don't get me wrong, but Aldridge was getting some takedowns. She was landing some decent shots, and then she got caught in a guillotine. If that's like a little bit of a problem for you, and she can survive the first round and stuff all your takedowns and get back up and get her own takedowns and land counter shots on you and hang with you a little bit on the feet, man, I think that Jessica Andrade is going to be all of those problems and more. And she knows that. She's just collecting free paychecks because she beats anyone other than Weili Zhang right now and most of the top strawweights. So she beat Lemos, first round finish. Like, you don't do that to Lemos, but Andrade does. I think Andrade is one of the most underrated female fighters in UFC history. I know her record isn't too nice, 24 and 9. Sorry. So it's not the best looking of records, but most women don't fight for that long. She's picked up a lot of experience, and I think that's going to be the difference here in this main event. I think she just steps in, gets the job done, TKO, first round, finishes off Erin Blanchfield. I don't know why the UFC let this happen. I guess they wanted to keep the card together, and if Blanchfield wins, she'll be right to the top of the rankings. I just think this is a little bit too much too soon, and I can see her landing a few shots, and all of a sudden Blanchfield don't want it anymore. So I'll go Andrade getting this one done. She hits different as a female fighter, and I think she's just a step above all the rest of these women's flyweights outside of Shevchenko, who was able to get her down, don't get me wrong, but it's different, man. Blanchfield couldn't really get down JJ Aldridge, you know what I mean? Like, I know she took down Molly McCann, and she did look good in that fight against Molly McCann, and Molly McCann's not that good. And people really brought into the hype of Molly McCann. And if you were in the know, you knew that Blanchfield was going to do that to her. You know? I can't go. I can't go with Blanchfield here. I just can't do it. Gotta trust in Andrade. She must be a favourite, right? I'm sure she's a favourite here. She's a 2-1 favourite. I think that's nice. That's good odds as a favourite. You know what I mean? This is like a Dagestani top contender versus an up-and-comer from the US. Like, I bet you if Jessica Andrade's name was Jessica Andrade-Jamedov, she'd be a 5-1 favourite. You know what I mean? It's just how it is nowadays. So I think take those odds, 2-1. Not too shabby. I reckon she'll get a TKO. I don't see Blanchfield finishing her, so we'll see how it goes. I got Andrade. Maybe Blanchfield gets the upset and turns into a star. Who knows? Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye. What a card. Can't wait for it.